All righty. Excellent. Welcome to the Standard Podcast Team, where we raise the bar, rebuild the culture, and call out the lies or misconceptions that nobody else will. This isn't motivation. This is a movement. I'm Thomas Rowe, joined by my co-host, Aaron Charles, and today we're sitting down with Preston Ingram, a proven college basketball leader with over 28 years of coaching experience, 22 of those at the collegiate level as a head coach, program executive, and assistant. Preston owns over 100 career wins, back-to-back AMC Championships, and honors including AMC Coach of the Year, two-time HoopDirt Coach of the Week, and NABC Team of the Week. His teams have achieved historic milestones, national tournament appearances, record-setting conference play, and consistent academic and athletic excellence. But here's what makes Preston different. In 22 years of college coaching, he's been part of 14 championships, conference tournament championships, and Final Four appearances. And before he ever coached a championship, he won as a player, a national championship. Beyond the court, Preston is an amateur recruiter who has developed several players of the year, multiple all-conference players, and All-Americans. With a master's degree in human performance and a business background in marketing and management, Preston is a performance-driven, relationship-focused leader committed to developing people and programs with integrity. This isn't just about basketball. This is about what it takes to build championship cultures, develop young people, and create legacy that goes well beyond the court and not just wins and losses. We're going to dive into the truth behind what it really takes to build identity, discipline, and legacy in sports and in life. Let's get into it. Coach, thank you so much for joining us. We're super excited to have you here.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate the introduction. I think that might have been way overbound of everything, but I appreciate you having me on.
Of course. Let's start here with 28 years of coaching experience, 22 at the college level, over 100 wins, back-to-back AMC championships, and you've been a part of 14 championships as a coach. You also won a national championship as a player. What does raising the standard mean to you and with the work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, raising the standard really just means that you create an environment where where average is no longer acceptable. Where excellence only becomes the expectation of every single day that you're doing for your program. Those that you're surrounding with, from staff to administrations to players. It's not about just winning games. I think that's probably a big, huge misconception about it. It's about elevating the accountability, the discipline, your preparation, your character on a daily basis, right? One thing for me is a quote that I live by is doing something today that you didn't do yesterday that improve you for tomorrow. And I think the only way that you're able to really elevate the standard is by making the standard every single time that you go about doing it. Over the course of my career, it's about, it's more important to say that, hey, I've got a player coming in and he wants to be able to achieve what it is wants to be able to achieve. And he tells me that he needs to make sure that, hey, coach, I want to be a player of the year. I want to be an all-conference player. I want to be an All-American, whatever it's going to be. A lot of them talk about wanting to be a pro. And if you want to be a pro, then it's about you modeling your professionalism of being a professional every day, right?
Right.
And if you're going to be a professional every day, then it's about being a standard of a standard every single time you step on the floor. That you're acting, you're articulating, you're preparing yourself to be an All-American. You're preparing yourself to be an all-conference player, a person of that. And so it becomes an everyday habit. And over the course of my 22 years, it's been just that. It's been about creating these habits every single time that we're putting together our performance of the court of how we're going to be able to do our due diligence every day. And the other part of this thing also, too, I think that for me has also been big for me is everywhere I've been but one place, we've been able to achieve something that's never been achieved before in the school's history. And I think that's also been a big, huge testament to the coaches I work for, to the players I've coached, to the administrations that I've been working for, all but one institution. We've been able to accomplish something that's never been done before, or it hadn't been done in a magnitude of years. And so I think that's part of about the deal of it also, too, is about leaving the standard is when you leave, did you leave that program in a better place that you found it?
Sure.
Competitively, culturally, structurally, did you build the foundation for the program to continue to build? And I think that's a big, huge component to anything that you want to be able to do, that you want to touch it. You want to rise the standard and make the standard every single time you step on the floor.
No doubt. And what would you say is the biggest lie you feel, or biggest lie or misconception you feel about the culture of basketball industry is selling coaches, players, and programs about what it takes to build a championship culture?
Yeah, really. I think culture tells us that if you win enough, you earn enough, you achieve enough, you get recognized enough that you finally feel secure. And that's not necessarily true. You do all these things that, you'll get this respected and satisfaction of what it needs to be. I think, what it really comes down to as coaches, a lot of times we're stressed when you're winning of being at the top. And that's hard to do, is to maintain to stay at the top. And then I think there's stress when you're at the bottom and you're not winning, right? And so I think a lot of it is if it doesn't align with the purpose or integrity and relationships, then you have an emptiness to you. It really just winning doesn't fix everything. Status doesn't define value every single time. And if you grind now, you're going to live better or live later. This is going to be what it's going to be. The championships don't build culture, people do.
Right.
The people that you surround yourself with, your administrations, coaches can only do so much, but if your administration doesn't align to the exact same thing, to be in the exact same page, we're working what I talk about in I's and T's, that we're going to work in alignments and we understand where our cap is going to be at if it's a T. But if we're working in S's and C's, that means that we're not building a culture or brand. And what we want to be to make sure that we do is that we don't find our fulfillment by just a scoreboard, but what's the impact that we're doing every single day. And that our wins are not just a direct correlation to our identity. I think a lot of times in athletes, what we do is that we find as coaches and as athletes, we don't know what our self-value is going to be outside of basketball or outside of sport. Well, we want to make sure that we align ourselves to find the real success is that between who we really are and what do we want to value. How do you lead? How do you develop people? I think the biggest relationship for me is building something that's going to last, where I have these former players now call me back and wanting to make sure that we're still having straight, good conversation. I just had 3 former players call me last night and literally come back and say, Coach, hey, we're moving back to St. Louis. Hey, I want to be able to catch back up. Hey, I want to connect. Hey, I remember this. We're having these conversations about that. I think that's where the alignment is going to be at. And that's where the true culture of value really comes into place. Like I don't really use the word culture too much. I use the word value. And if you have good value, then you create the word culture. I don't think you can create the word culture unless you have great value.
No question.
And so those things I think have to align back to the exact same thing. And that it's not that you're not selling a external validation. That I'm actually, the truth is the internal standards that you're sustained is going to be the greatness of what you actually get. And that are you creating these young guys or young women to be better future husbands and mothers and people in society, and having these actual true value pieces to create better cultures than what they're going to be.
No doubt. We had a coach on here, much like yourself, that he said, I define my wins by what happens with my players after the game. Basketball's a game. Life is a different game. So, yeah, I think that's powerful. You've been the AMC Coach of the Year, 2-time HoopDirt Coach of the Week, and your teams have achieved national tournament appearances and record-setting conference play. What separates programs that achieve consistent excellence from those that don't?
Really, I think it's the people that you surround yourself with, the players that you try to recruit, and your staff and the players you're bringing in. Is your character and your values and disciplines and how you treat people when no one is watching, are they measurable to the exact same thing? I think outside of of what your daily day is going to end up being is, are you competing with excellence? Are you competing with that you're holding your standards of what you're talking about every day? And is it the exact same beat to the exact same tone? Meaning the fact that, like, me and my staff, are we beating the exact same drum? Are we beating 3 different drums? I think that kind of plays into place with that also too. I think the strongest programs that I've led wasn't just based on talent. It was based on the identity, the accountability, the toughness, the unselfishness, our academics, our disciplines, our daily habits. Like, that's the performance and the byproduct of who we're going to end up being. And that kind of how we go. Like I talk to our teams all the time. Like, we never really talked about winning the championship. We want to talk about winning today. Mm-hmm. People ask me a lot of times about, like, Coach, what's your 5-year plan? And it's to be a better husband, better father, a better man than I was 5 years from now. Like, that's who I strive to be. Right.
Right.
What I don't know though is that if I have a goal that I want to be into a team, then I have to be able to do something today to be able to obtain that goal. So if I'm not like working right now to be able to make this daily habit, then I'm never going to be able to get there. And so, we're in the business to make sure that we're building the strongest programs is going to be based off the people that you build, but making sure those people that you're trying to build align with what it is that you're trying to do. And like one of the great examples I think right now in the coaches world, and I give flowers to all the time, is Ben McCollum at Iowa. Like, the one thing I love about Ben is he's not going to recruit anything outside of what he believes in. He's really big about developing from ground and make sure that you're doing it, especially in the world of transfer portal. He's done a phenomenal job of maintaining his actually excellence of what he does. And he's very, very diligent about how he's going to go about his recruitment. And those are some of the things we try to model. Like I said, the one thing that I have to go back and say is that, my last stop, we kind of failed in that aspect. And it was something I kind of got outside the character of really who our identity is. And so I think sometimes as coaches, sometimes you got to go back and reformat that also too. If you're going to be actually be truthful about everything about doing, right?
Right.
Because your identity has to make sure that it goes beyond the performance which you're on the floor and making sure that everything aligns the exact same thing. Because at the end of the day, you want your performance to change, then their identity has to make sure that your identity has to sustain the exact same excellence.
Right.
Every single thing that you do.
No doubt. That's awesome. We're going to turn it over to Aaron for segment 2, which is identity and legacy. Aaron, take it away.
Okay, here I am. So, Preston, I would love for you to tell me, who are you beyond all the accolades, beyond all the things that Thomas shared at the top of the show? Just who are you and what's most important to you?
Yeah, I'm a man of faith. I'm a husband. I'm a father. Those things mean more to me than any title, championship, anything I've ever been accomplished on that part, right? From a personal standpoint. And I've been blessed to be able to win a lot of different things. And a lot of times I think you get caught up about your titles. And when you're living every day about a title, those things have a tendency to go away. What really your legacy is your reflection of your impacts. You're taking a group of young men, you're an extended parent. And, there's times that these young guys either, they're growing up and your job is to make sure that you enhance them and that you're making sure that they're becoming stronger husbands, better fathers, better professionals, that they continue to understand what's going to be. And are you operating at a high standard? Are you growing your assistants and making sure that you're putting them in positions to be able to make sure that they obtain, what it is that they want to achieve in life? Are you making sure that you are taking care of these things that every day that you're growing the expectations of the people that you're around? So I think the legacy for me is long far in my identity of who I am. It's far more than any of the things I've accomplished. It's because it's never been about me. I say this all the time. Like, I don't really care about myself. What I care about is how we're going to impact everybody around. And are we doing this where it reflects exactly who I really want to be? And I think that's a bigger thing. Is it healthy for me and for them? And are we providing actual impacts? Because at the end of the day, the titles, those things fade away. I mean, you can be the best of the best. You hear anything about these top tier coaches, what they really hear about, like, back reflection for the players, is that they talk to them, they talk about them like they're a father and they were a father figure, and that they were, a guy that really helped kind of change and adapt their lives. Right. And I think for me, like, I have a couple players now that call me dad, and at first I didn't know if that really kind of hurt my soul or if that was a deal that I go back and say,
am I that old? What are you saying?
Yeah. Like I didn't know, I was like, man, like, okay, wait a minute now. Call me Pops, and I go, oh, wait, I'm getting called Pops, and I was in my 30s at the time. I was like, man, I feel old. But, it was one of my greatest achievements. I talk about this a lot of time. When I was 23, I became guardian of a fifth grader. And, I had a lot of young guys that come in from single parent homes, and they to this day, that was 26 years ago, they call me up and they either call me uncle, or they call me pops, or they still call me coach, and they lean on me for guidance and advice, and like that means the world to me, probably more than anything I've ever accomplished individually. Because at the end of the day, I'm not going to be able to accomplish anything individually if it wasn't for them.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And so like a lot of times, like, yeah, you win coach of the year, but you're not winning coach of the year if it wasn't for your assistants. You're not winning coach of the year if it wasn't for your players. You're not winning coach of the year if it wasn't for your administration. You're not winning championships if it wasn't for the exact same alliance, right? And it's got to be reflect all together as one. And so to me, I think that's bigger. Are you leaving it? Are you making a strong impact that's going to last forever? Because it's got to last a lot longer. If my coaching days are done, I want to make sure that I made an impact correctly. And I always said that if I overstep that boundary, that it doesn't happen, then that's the day that it's time for me to walk away, because I want to make sure that I don't ever cross that or disrespect that in any kind of way.
I love that. I think, you hit on so many key points there. And one I'd like for you to maybe expand upon is what separates championship cultures. You talked really about everybody that goes in, that it takes in order to build that. But how do you really create that separation from just being a good program?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is, is what you try to drive in every day and having a game plan and strategically you're placing, right? In this transfer portal area, man, there's a lot in that kind of goes into it, right? Like, a lot of times when you're building the program up right now, you have some coaches that just take the top talent and it's okay. Hey, I'm going to take this top talent, I'm going to throw it in a smorgasbord, and we're going to try to make something out of it. And then you have others, that gets really strategic. When I was at Missouri Baptist, we got very strategic. We didn't want a team full of just scores and team just full of this or that. We wanted to have a smudge pot of a little bit of everything. We want to put all the seasoning into a pot. And then as a staff, what we wanted to be able to do is that I wanted to be able to self-identify my staff of what their biggest strengths were. And my strengths was, in one of my assistants, Taylor Jarvis, that he was very good about offensive identity, player assessments, having a great standard of knowing kind of how to connect and how to kind of work on different things in that part. And I wanted to be able to push him on that part. And then like my other guys, Chris Forrest is really good about player development and breaking down a player and having the kind of a model of kind of how we want to be able to do that, and then throwing it into the kind of identity that we do. It's one of the reasons why those two guys particularly, like now is leading the program at Missouri Baptist and doing so well, is because of the fact that they kind of have an alignment of kind of what their identities were. And my job was to make sure that we managed that properly so that it would affect our players better. And make sure that we're doing those things that align the exact same way. And so what we wanted to do is that we wanted to make sure that, okay, hey, this is the idea that we want to be able to get to. And then what we want to do is that we want to pump to our players every day that you are the standard. The one thing that you would never hear me say is that we need to go into a game and we need to match another team's intensity. I think that means that you're not the standard, that you're still chasing the standard, right? What we wanted to do is that teams had to adjust to us. That when we came in, we was going to be the toughest team. We was going to be the most physical team. We wanted to be the hardest team that you had to prepare for, both offensively and defensively, that you had to adjust to us. We wanted to be different than anybody else that you played. And then whenever our players step on the floor, they understood that they had a certain probability that they had to a certain expectation that you had to stay with at this every single time, no matter what. No matter if you was a star player or you're not a star player, that if you wasn't meeting that full, then you had to get subbed out. That every single time you step on the floor, we had certain goals that we had to achieve. And every single time we stepped on the floor, that we need to do that, whether that was in film, whether that was on the track, whether that was in the weight room, whether that was in the classroom, whether that was in our daily conversations, our daily meetings, one-on-one meetings, team meetings, whatever that it was, we need to make sure that we had those certain expectations every single time that we did it. And that then turns into success. That then turns into championship standards. That then turns into the people that you want to associate yourself with. And then you're also in the recruiting process, you're meeting really good people. that you're not dealing with off the court issues and headaches and everything else in that part. And every day you have to be to go back and fix. That's never going to create championship cultures on that.
No, you're spot on. It's that consistency day in and day out in everything that you do that creates that. So I love that. My final question before I turn it back over to Thomas is, what's one truth you wish every coach, player, or program understood about building something that lasts well beyond one season so that you can build a championship culture?
Honesty, right? I think honesty it's a forbidden word in today's world.
Mm.
And we want honesty. Like I would prefer the way to work honesty rather than fabrications. I think a lot of times what people don't like to be done is that they don't want to get called out today's game. And the reason why the portal's so high and that the administrators are so sensitive about everything right now and the kind of the way that the world is, we don't necessarily respect honesty, although that we say that we want honesty, right?
Yep.
And what I look at is step back and say, at the end of the day, honesty has to be the forefront of everything. You got to be told, hey, you're not doing something right. And that it has to change. If you're taking over a program that's never won before, a program that doesn't understand what success looks like, understand what it looks like, tastes like, feels like, there has to be an honesty question that has to happen on that part, right? Like you have to have an honest conversation at that deal. Instead of saying, hey, okay, well now this, and this has to change for us to take the first step. We've got to make sure that we're aligned and put our players in the best situation they need to be. But you got to get everybody on the exact same page. And sometimes right now, I think that's the hardest thing to be able to do is get everybody on the exact same page where there's trust, value that go together. Because then what happens is if you don't have it and everything's separated, then when you have this honest conversation, people's feelings get put in they're in accord. And that's when the program goes down. And then what happens is that even right now you're seeing in college athletics is that, you made a cultural change, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a fix, right? Like there's a reason why the program hasn't been successful. And what we want to be able to do is that how you be able to create the long lasting professionalism part of that deal is that you look at what happened prior to, what worked, what didn't work, and then where is it the place that we need to make sure that we're really put our focus in on so that we can step back and say, okay, hey, this database here tells us that this didn't work or this did work. So let's build off of it or let's change it. And I think that's where a lot of times working these I's and T's, they really have a correspondence together is that when you're working together in the exact same alliance, that you're going to have some tough times and you're going to have some good times, but understanding that you're trying to take the standard up and that comes with tough conversations and tough disciplines, tough remands. You want to make sure that everybody's in the exact same alliance and everybody works together in the exact same alliance. And that we're not working all over this left side, right side, and we're only crossing the paths a couple times. We want to make sure that we're working together on the exact same page every single time, that we have a tough conversation that is understood. And from players to staff to whoever else is going to be involved in that part, we need to have everybody on the exact same page. I think that's the only way that is really kind of good created on that part.
I think that's so valuable. I think you hit on something that I think is so important is how do you establish that culture where you can have truth and honest conversations, because you're absolutely right. That is what is missing. So Thomas, take it away.
Right on, Coach. We're going to get into segment 3, advice across stages. If you could sit down with a young coach that's just starting out, someone who wants to build what you've built, what do they need to understand about developing programs, people, and players?
Yeah, I think that's a big question, right? Because I think, if you'd have asked me this 5 years ago, I think that probably my answer would have been totally different. In today's society, I think there's a lot of different things. One, I think you have to be quick to adapt. The one thing that for me, when I first got into coaching, it was in grassroots. And I got kind of ridiculed for coaching grassroots for so long because it was like, well, you're just coaching grassroots basketball. Like, what do you know about, how to be able to handle all this other different stuff? And I'd say the one thing about grassroots was it taught me how to adapt really quick. You better be thinking on your feet really fast, especially playing the Nike UIBL and you're playing with some top tier athletes, but you're playing 5 games in a weekend. That's going to be 5 different occasions and 5 different outlooks. You better learn how to adapt fast. and be able to know how to think quick on your feet and not have to be able to sit back and really kind of over analyze it, but know how to adjust and make sure that you're learning how to in-game manage. I think that's big for especially young coaches. And then also understand your temperaments. I had a really good friend of mine. He's head of officials now, big time official. He called me one time and said, "Preston, hey, you got to, I was young and dumb and just full of energy, and I was popping all over the place." He's like, "Hey, man, sometimes how you handle certain situations, you got to make sure that you handle it properly. That you just can't come in hot on everything. Not everything's important. Listening with one ear and watch with one eye. So therefore, then you're not just always taking everything to heart. Not everything's that serious. Really, really key in, focus on the parts that you really, really are true to you, that you really want your program to look like, and make sure that you can take a little bit of this program, that program, this program, and try to model that, but model that to your own self-identity, to who you really are. You're not going to be Bill Self, Tom Izzo, Coach Calipari. One thing I say about all three of those guys, do they do it right? Absolutely. But are they right? Absolutely not. No coach is right and no coach is wrong. It's what they believe in. It's what they see. All three of those guys have been very successful and they've all won championships. But at the exact same time, though, they're all do it different ways.
Right.
Calipari's way of doing it is completely different than Izzo's, completely different than Bill Self's. But they all three have great success. And so what I think for a young guy is coming into the program is find out who you are, what you want to be, and how you want to make sure that you mold that. But then also, too, surround yourself with people that are completely different than you, that provide the strength of a weakness area that you are weak in.
Right.
If you're not a strong recruiter, find you a go-getter. But find you a guy that's going to align to find the recruits or the people that you really want to be around and that you want to be the coach. Don't recruit outside who you are. Recruit inside of who you are.
Right.
I think a lot of times coaches, youth-wise, they want to get all this talent, but they don't know how to manage the people. They don't know how to manage those people, and they don't know how to manage whenever they have conflicts in that part. And so, therefore, then your smudge is always turning all the time. What I found out over 22 years of coaching basketball is, you graduate, you graduate towards the people that you really want to self-identify with. And that type of player is who you want to make sure that you model yourself after every single time you have a new recruiting class. So therefore, then your retentions are high, and then also too, that you're honest with them again, so that when you have these tough conversations, that your retentions are not going to just go out the door and say, okay, I don't want to do that.
Right.
That you have to have a tough conversation that, okay, hey, I got you. And then also too, are you humble enough to be able to identify yourself with, hey, I made a mistake also too. I'm okay with that. I can do my push-ups in practice. If I'm going to hold a player to a standard to that you're not past that standard yourself, that you can self-identify with that, but making sure that you're going to teach what you know and understand, and that you're humble enough to be able to go back and reformat what it is you need to be able to learn more of. And then when you walk in there, that you're confident. You're walking in that you understand what it's going to be, and that you're humble enough to be able to reach outside resources when you're not for sure exactly what that's going to look like on that part. I mean, you see some of these top tier coaches, sometimes they reach out to other coaches to try to identify something or learn something more. Never get bigger than that. The one thing I think for me as a head coach that I like to think that I've never lost passion of is how to be an assistant still. So the floors need to be clean. I'm the one cleaning the floors. If the locker room needs to get picked up, I need to pick the locker room up. Then I'm going to hold my staff and my players to the exact same accountability on that.
Right on. You're a master recruiter, coach. You mentioned that previously about if you're not a good recruiter, find somebody. In today's environment with transfers, the transfer portal, and NIL, what should coaches and programs know about building relationships and recruiting with integrity?
Man, oh boy, that's a big question. Honestly, man, I think there's a lot of it right now that you can. I mean, that's probably a whole nother hour conversation with that right now, right? Like, of what your identity is, right? I think what it comes down to is when you're looking through the portal, through the high school and the transfers and, the prep schools and everything else that goes along with this thing. And, now you got, conversations with not just AAU coaches and high school coaches, but now with agents and everything else that goes along with that too, and players and persons and family members and everything else that goes along with it. At the end of the day, I think what it really comes down to is that you still got to be able to still recruit what you're comfortable with. You know, like, again, I use Ben McComb as this perfect example, man. He goes through a strategicness of how he wants to personally identify that player and how it's going to fit his program. You know, Matt Painter at Purdue, the exact same way. Mark Few at Gonzaga, it's the exact same way. Sam, you know, Kelvin Sampson at Houston, the exact same way. Those four guys, in my mind, probably have done it the best in this model because they've always maintained constant success because they still stay true to who they are, what they are, and how they are. Meaning the fact that it's not just the what, it's not just because you're a big-time name, big-time player. Do you model the things that they identify as their value, that identify that's going to create their value to the culture? And so, like, looking at these players, you know, the players right now, how much baggage is it coming with the player?
Right.
Some coaches are okay with that. Some coaches are not okay with that. You know, the player right now, if you really want to get recruited, lower your baggage. You know, increase your value to you. Increase your marketability to you. Are you going to be a guy that's going to be consistent? Are you a guy that's going to be every single day that, you know, that you're going to bring your lunch pail? Or can you take tough coaching? Are you willing to get coached? On bad days, it's not always going to be peaches and cream. Like on your recruiting visits, you're going to see the glitz and glamour of everything. But the reality of the fact of it is you want to be able to pull back the curtain and see who the wizard is, you know, and, you know, pull back and see what the true identity is going to be. And I think a lot of your good coaches are going to showcase that first.
Right.
So that before you actually get there, that, hey, yeah, this is going to be great, but I'm also going to coach you hard. And can you handle this? And are you going to be all right with that? I think that comes up with his upbringing and who he's been around and how he's been coached prior to. And so I think that's a big thing in this, especially in this market now, because it's kind of hard because you're speed dating. You know, you're speed dating these kids anymore. You know, you're not really getting to know them anymore. You're speed dating. You're getting in there quick and you're trying to find out. And then if you're assistant, hey, coach, I got one. But do you really know the kid?
Right.
You got a 30-second window with them. And some of these power fours are now, you know, they're speed dating their agents. They're not even really speed dating the kid.
Right.
You know, I mean, like, if I'm power four and this kid's asking for this amount of money, am I in that market with that kid or not?
Yeah.
Do I have that amount of money to be able to spend or not spend? And, you know, you're a lower level, then you're really kind of fishing for needles in a haystack. And so I think you really got to be able to find your climate of where you're going to end up being. I think there's some programs that can still maintain their climate and maintain their success and maintain exactly who their identity is going to be. And I think those are the ones that right now that are being more competitive every single year because they stay true to their alliance, you know, and it falls aligned with what has worked. I think it still goes back to the exact thing we talked about is administrations, they're important in the entire process. If the administration's on board with what the coach's values and the vision is going to be, and the coach is on board with the administration values, and everybody's identifying together as whole, then yes, you can have success, especially when you're building a bad program up or you're maintaining a great program to maintain and to take that great program and then elevate it up to another level, right? That still has to go exact same identifier. If it's not, then it becomes too hard of a battle every day. Then you become a deal where you're up and down. You know, you're basically working as a heartbeat. You're not working as a status, maintaining this thing going up. You're just going up and down, up and down, up and down.
No doubt. Coach, I mean, you're just giving us a clinic. There's so much great information. We're going to turn it over to Aaron for segment 4, which is the rapid fire round. Aaron, take it away.
Okay. So I'm going to start a sentence and you're going to finish it for me. So
okay. All right.
This is fun.
Great.
Okay. Discipline equals.
Ooh, discipline equals standard.
Faith equals.
Excellence. Your identity of who you are.
Leadership equals.
Everydayness. Being consistent. And being the one that is willing to get down the grunts with those individuals. That you're not above everybody else, that you're going to be in the mud with them.
I love that. Legacy equals.
Your impact of, did you create players' identity to be better men every day?
Awesome. And what is one thing you would never compromise on?
My identity of who I am as a faith and as a man. My standard is a standard of who I want to be every day. I want to make sure that my daughter and my son have somebody that they can model after, and my wife has somebody that she can be proud of.
I love that. And if you could put a billboard up for all the young coaches and players today, what would your billboard message be?
Do something today you didn't do yesterday is improve you for tomorrow. And what you're not changing, you're choosing.
Yeah, that is powerful. That is so powerful. Okay, Thomas, you're back.
Awesome, Coach. Before we wrap up, we always like to give our guests an opportunity to kind of open the floor. Is there something we didn't touch on today that you feel coaches, players, families, or programs need to hear about building a championship culture with integrity?
Yeah, stay true to who you are. Stay
Got it.
true to your identity. Stay true to what your core values are going to be. If you're not for sure about what those are, really spend time on that. Spend time on who you really want to be around. Making sure that you hire correct. Make sure that when you're taking a job, that you understand the ins and outs of that. But really stay true to who you really are, no matter what. In the face of a giant, make sure that you stand true to be. Understand that you belong in that room, and that no matter what that it is, that you belong, and that you're good about what it's going to end up being. Never have self-doubt as a player, as a coach, of any of that part of that deal. Understand that what you're doing, as long as you know that you're doing it right and that you can sleep well at night, that you did it right, and that you can live with whatever the results are going to be from that.
Got it. You went from the rapid fire to the hot seat. Now, top 3 sports movies of all time to coach.
Oh, man. Somebody asked me this question. Remember the Titans? It's up there.
Okay.
Remember the Titans is up there for me. Blue Chips is another one. I think Blue Chips, right, especially in today's world.
Yeah.
Blue Chips fits today's world.
No doubt.
Because of the fact that, kind of going back to that exact same thing, Coach sold his soul. And he went against the grain. Yep. And he said he'll never do that. And with his integrity, he walked away from it.
That's it.
And that really, I just watched it the other day, and I think that's big. And then Coach Carter, because in the day, Coach Carter created the standard. He didn't care about what it's going to be. He stayed 10 to it, and he was building those men to be better men, better people, and not to be satisfied with the surroundings where you're at. And so remember the Titans. That is an all-time great, Blue Chips and Coach Carter, I think would be part of my 3.
I love it. Yeah, Blue Chips was way ahead of its time, right? With Nick Nolte, that was amazing. And Coach Carter was it was right on point. And I'm glad that you didn't do all basketball. We get basketball coaches, we get former NBA and NFL guys, and they always kind of stick to their sport. But you got to have an honorable mention of Hoosiers in there too. That was always a feel good movie.
Yeah, no doubt, yep. no doubt. They're in. One other movie too was Glory Road. I think that's another one also too.
Which
was just in Glory Road? Glory Road.
Yes. That was a great one.
You got to throw Hoosiers and Glory Road in there, man. Those are 2 big ones.
No doubt. Coach, where can people connect with you and learn more about your approach of coaching and leadership, whether it's a website, an email, or anything that you want to share?
Yeah, social media. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Coach P. Igram. Follow me there. Facebook is just my regular name. Those are probably my hot spots right now that I have. Follow me up, send me a message, send me a DM. I'm always open. I'm always big about helping young guys get into the business and teaching them the goods and bads about college basketball in comparison to high school to college. I think those are big parts of that deal, but also too, just impacts of how the way that I can help. At the end of the day, I think as coaches, if we're doing things right, you're in the business to be a servant. And to be a servant, and I want to be to serve, and I want to be to help and provide a pathway. If I feel like I can't make that accomplishment, that's going to be that's detrimental to me. But I want to make sure that I'm a servant on that part. So I'm always available to anybody out there, but definitely send me a message and let me know.
Awesome. Appreciate that. I mean, that is incredible, Coach. Right now, we talk about how social media could be a blessing and a curse, But when we meet coaches like yourself and other people in our network, they just want to be that, give back, be of service, because we don't want to see these athletes make the same mistakes that we made or the same mistakes that we've seen around us, because an impulsive decision or a careless decision now could cost a young man or woman a lot.
Yeah.
Team, if this conversation challenged you, inspired you, or made you think differently, share it. Send it to a young coach trying to build something, a player who wants to understand what championship culture looks like, or a parent choosing the right program. Also, connect with Coach Preston and learn more about his approach. 28 years of experience, 14 championships as a coach, a national championship as a player. This is what developing people and programs with integrity looks like. This is the Standard Podcast, and this movement only grows when we raise the standard together. Talent fades, truth endures. Truth endures. Let's raise the bar, let's rebuild the culture, and let's become the standard. We'll see you next time. Aaron, Coach, thank you so much for your time. We certainly appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate having me on.